What's happening, guys? Happy Sunday and welcome back to another edition of the Dynasty WarZone, the People's Dynasty podcast. On this week's show, we're going to start talking rookies. Now, if you're watching live on Sunday, it's halftime of the Buffalo Bills and Baltimore Ravens game, but we're podcasting, we're talking rookies. We don't care about the postseason, we care about next season. And with me tonight is not my normal co-host, Mr. Jerry Sinclair. He's working as we speak, as we're going live. But I do have a co-host. He hosts a show on our network, the Dynasty WarZone. It's called the Rookie Rundown. He is my go-to guy to get, up to speed on this rookie class. You've probably heard him before. He may be new to the player profiler audience, but it's Mr. Dallas Hyder. And you can find him on Twitter at Salad Galore. Now, salad is Dallas spelled backwards, so there's two L's, at Salad Galore. And he turned us on to a bunch of prospects last year, the last several years. But Dallas, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, Memphis, it's good to be back in, streaming here. I took a little bit of a hiatus during the regular season. As you had mentioned, life has been kicking me in the rear end, but it is good. This is my time of year, and my type of prospects to talk about are the rookies. So it should be a fun show.
Yeah, and talking in the pre-show, it sounds like on our network, you're going to start kicking up some rookie coverage of your own. Do you have like a set schedule, or are you just going to drop the occasional episode? Now, Jesse will tell you, Jesse was on the show recently. He's like, him and the guys, they record religiously every Thursday. I'm the slap ass who doesn't get it up on time. Dallas will just have to tell me when he drops an episode, or maybe you have a plan.
Yeah, I used to be really religious as well. I would be pretty consistent with it. It has been a little bit of a change. I am very busy over the next couple months, so it's more so going to be kind of sporadic. I may be pre-recording quite a few positional-related rankings and prospect profiles, and then giving them to you in general to drop and sprinkle in to our lovely viewers and listeners whenever you decide to. So,
all right, that sounds good. I love the hour-ish long format of a podcast. Yep. Sometimes you can run a little short. I think anything in that 45 to an hour and 15 is like the actual sweet spot, but it doesn't have to be. You might drop like a 20-minute podcast on running backs, or your running back 6 through 10, but that's what we're going to get to tonight. We're going to get into some rankings. And like I said, Jerry not with us. He had to work. And let's be honest, Dallas, you're not a Lions fan. You're a Bears fan.
Yep.
And how bad, or did you feel bad for Lions fans during that game last night?
Yeah, that's the thing is most of the NFC North fans don't hate Lions fans. Like at the end of the day, like we all know that it's been pretty much pain for, a couple of decades. The Bears have taken over that position. So I can't be mad. I can't be upset. I can't be salty at the fact that they're showing success on a regular basis. I just have to be like, well, there's only one. If anything, I'm more upset watching Jaden Daniels light the world on fire right now. Just, back of the head thinking what could have been potentially based off of what we're dealing with Kaleb right now. So,
well, in fairness with you as a Bears fan, I don't think the book's out on Kaleb. No. I wasn't anti-Kaleb like I was Justin Fields, but I wasn't pro-Kaleb. I just didn't like the coach. I think Matt Eberflus for the Bears is a really good defensive coordinator, just really wasn't the head coach kind of guy. I'll be very, very curious to see who the Bears bring in there, because you got good weapons, Swift and Moore, and I think I've been saying it so far this offseason, and I think you're going to hear it a lot. I think Rome Odunze is going to be everybody's going to expect him to be next year's Jackson Smith-Njigba, the guy who takes that big sophomore step forward, and I think that's good. But yeah, Jerry would have been in no shape to have recorded tonight. Anyway, could you imagine like having to work and watch football? And I tell you, for me, the playoffs have not been great since we last recorded. My boy Sam Darnold shit the bed 2 times in a row. Thanks for nothing, Aaron Glenn. And then my Lions, I said I adopted the Lions this year because my Colts are terrible. And now I'm down to Josh Allen. Luckily, we're recording during halftime of that game. Luckily, Josh Allen's up 11, but it's a lot of football left to play. But at least the playoffs were better this weekend.
Yeah, sorry, there was a little bit of a lag there. I saw
You're good.
get back on there. Yeah, no, it was a weird playoff couple of weeks. Last week was kind of a bunch of stinkers, a lot of blowouts, wasn't that great. I loved the game, even though the Lions lost last night. That was exhilarating. I posted in the group chat they were on pace for like 110 points at halftime. It was insane. And I don't know. It's just been a fun viewing experience. I don't know. It's just always nice not having a lot of stress of having a team that you're truly rooting for. And then obviously living in Kansas City with all of my friends, I still have the proxy of at least enjoying the celebration associated with the Chiefs, even if I don't actually root for them. So,
well, and you get that Kansas City barbecue and the cold weather, so that all comes with it. And if you're looking for something that comes with everything, you might want to check out Dynasty Deluxe.
This episode is brought to you by Player Profiler, the Dynasty Deluxe package. The rankings are the best in the industry. It includes strategy mode where you can say, hey, change the rankings to be win now. Oh, change the rankings to be productive struggle. There's also a draft planner to help strategize where you should take players because the draft planner also includes ADP. There's a trade finder where we look up on My Fantasy League and we see trades that are done, including a particular player. Then there's a trade analyzer where you can plug in draft picks, players, and we assign a lifetime value to draft picks out 5 years. The best thing about our trade analyzer, it can't be gamed with volume. And there's mock draft data to see right now what's the market for player X versus player Y, including in the fall when very few mock drafts are happening. And our Dynasty Guide, the Dynasty Dominator, would cost you $10 on Amazon, but you get it for free with Dynasty Deluxe, and you get our rookie guide for free, a $25 value. So you get all of that for $45. I mean, it's a great deal.
It is, in fact, a great deal. And if you get the all-in package, which includes Dynasty Deluxe, if you use promo code WarZone, you'll save $25. So there you go. We're going to jump into some good people, bad tweets, Dallas. Now, you've done this segment with me before, so you are not a good people, bad tweets first timer.
Correct. Yeah, I'm very familiar with this. I don't often like taking shots at people, but I like telling people they're wrong. So I'm all game.
Well, there's been some good ones, and they came out of the woodwork after last night's game where Jaden Daniels, and I always own this. I was not a Jaden Daniels guy. I didn't see it. I thought he was old. Now, I wasn't as bad as this guy. And this guy in question is Joe, and that's it. He's Joe with a blue check mark at Joe A NFL on X Twitter. And Joe says the Commanders not only traded away a good starting quarterback in Sam Howell, but then passed on an elite QB, Drake May, to draft a bad QB, Jaden Daniels, compounding lost opportunities. And this is why he made the show, because this is the last part. Bookmark this tweet. I want to revisit it in 8 months and again in 20 months. Buddy, I'm going to save you any more months. This one did not go so well for you. What is your take on Joe's tweet?
Yeah, I don't know how anyone could watch Howell play on a consistent basis and kind of really dig in to him being the answer. He was fun, just like pretty much every Commanders quarterback over the last couple of years was. Like watching Heineke go out there and just throw the ball YOLO style was fun. Sam was the same way, didn't really have the consistency. So it's just a bad take. It didn't age well. That's why you don't typically try to have extremely strong stances on rookies coming in. I know you kind of have to if you want to draft them, but never really count anyone out, even through the first year. Like you said, like we're not out on Kaleb. If you look at the stats compared to Daniels and the other quarterbacks, there's about 3 or 4 quarterbacks in this class that were all right around the same regular season stats. Just some had higher win totals than others. So it didn't age very well. It doesn't look amazing, but everyone's got to, have some bad takes. I've still never repaired myself from the Javion Hawkins take from like 4 years ago. So it's okay.
Well, nobody bats 1,000. For me, it was just a reminder. Again, he said it with such authority that I thought, okay, this is perfect. But for me, the reason why I bring it up is it's fun because good people, bad tweets. It's a fun segment. But I also bring it up because like every year it's tweets like these and misses. Like I missed on Jaden Daniels. I didn't have Jaden Daniels very high, and that was clearly incorrect. But it reminds me that like I have to sharpen the pencil. Been very successful with rookies. I've done way better than I've done bad, and I put in the work, and I'm proud of that. But you just can't fall in love with your process. It's like, what little nuggets are we taking away from 2024 so that we are even more successful in 2025? It wasn't to body Joe. Joe bodied himself. Joe was more than where he needed to be to get bodied. So I like the conviction in which you said it, but you don't get to be upset when you wind up on good people, bad tweets, and you have to hear from Uncle Dana.
I'm going to tell you this. It was a huge, huge fucking clusterfuck. Yeah. Completely fucking irresponsible, a shit show, dangerous, stupid, irresponsible, and just completely fucking ridiculous.
There you go. Uncle Dana has said his part, got a little bit faster through the good people, bad tweets and the intro of the show because you guys are here. You're tuning in to hear about rookies. And that is Dallas's forte. Again, he hosts the Rookie Rundown on the Dynasty WarZone podcast channel and YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed, there's another incentive on top of Jesse and the guys doing the Dynasty front office. So Dallas, I'm going to hit you with an easy one. I don't want you to go too deep. You can go super flex or 1QB because I don't know that they would be different. But give me your top 5 rookies for Dynasty in this class. Now, I'll be very curious to see if a QB cracks your top 5. I will give you my top 5, but I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, with the world that we play in, it's really hard to keep a quarterback outside of the top 5. I don't think that this class is as bad at the quarterback position as the Kenny Pickett year, which is the one in recent memory that everyone just kind of latches onto with the Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral, that type of thing. I think it is a slight tier up just due to the massive upside that some of the prospects have. We just don't have a lot of high floor players to attach ourselves to at the quarterback position. But going off of top 5, I'm not going to talk about him pretty much at all in any of the episodes that I do. Ashton Genty's the 101, regardless of Superflex or 1QB for me. Number 1 player in this year's draft. Closest person, it happens every year when people get cute with it, but the closest person to Alvin Kamara play style that we have gotten since Alvin Kamara came out. He has the contact balance of an Alvin Kamara, a Kareem Hunt coming out. He's got the juice to take the long runs. He's got a compact build. So although he's not the heaviest, not the tallest, BMI is actually really good at the running back position based off of what he's at. Around 215 at 5'9" is pretty thick. So tried and true, number 1 in my rankings. It's hard for me to decide between the wide receivers. I will tell you right now, I also won't be talking a lot about Travis Hunter this season because I don't think he's going to play wide receiver. So I don't think there's really a need to waste time on that. There are some outlets out there that are really pushing him, telling you that you should still draft him potentially in the first round, which is insane to me in rookie drafts if he's a halfway player. So the 2 that are in my top 5, though, are Ted McMillan, Arizona, big boy, really fast, really fun specimen, very DK-esque when it comes to his body of work as well as his physical body. And then my personal favorite wide receiver is Luther Burden. You know me, after a couple of years here in Memphis, you are well acquainted with the fact that I like route runners and I like guys that can do any position on the field, and that's exactly what Luther Burden can do. The running back to break into my top 5 outside of Ashton Genty, I love Dylan Sampson. That is my running back from Tennessee. He's my RB2 on the board. Omarion Hampton's the fun pick for a lot of people. I have reservations about Omarion's style at the next level. He is very much a Braylon Allen, AJ Dillon, big physical thumper. If he gives you the counting stats like a Najee, I think it's going to be very nice and you will have a solid floor, but he has to find the right system, find a coach willing to give him all of those touches, because if you look at his actual metrics, not very good in college. He is very much a cruel stat player, even though he is fun to watch on his physical angry run highlights. And then tight end, you have to throw him in there, Tyler Warren out of Penn State. he is a fun gadget player. There seems to be one guy every year at the tight end position now over the last 4 or 5 now that comes in with the hype to potentially change the position. I think Warren is that guy. When you're seeing the target totals, the reception totals, and the receiving yard totals that he has at a Power 5 conference, and he still succeeds even in the playoff, it's something that you have to take note of. This tight end class is actually my favorite position in this year's draft class because I think there's a lot of guys that can come in to these aging guys that have kind of slid out of relevancy, the Dalton Schultz, the Hunter Henrys that we just kind of are forced to play because they're seeing targets on their team. The tight end position for me is really fun, and I definitely have Warren in my top 5.
Well, our top 3 are the same. I also, and I'll be honest, I have a question for you about Dylan Sampson because he was nowhere near my radar. So I definitely want to get in depth with him. I agree with you on Luther Burden. If Luther Burden winds up in a spot like New England, I think that's probably too high because I don't think New England would take him inside the top 5. And then I don't think he'll be there at the top of round 2. So unless they were to trade back into the first round, but like if he went to a spot like that where he could become the de facto number 1 and get that kind of volume, he could go ahead of Tet McMillan for me. I'm with you. Luther Burden is my favorite wide receiver in the class. I have Egbuka, the wide receiver and I'm going to lean wide receiver until I see where some of the running backs go. There are a ton of good spots. Like I'll ask you the Ashton Genty question here in a minute. And then I do have Hampton. And what appeals to me with Hampton is given his size, given his track background, but also pretty decent hands for a guy that size. 38 catches this past year, 29 catches the year before. So in a PPR world, which most of us play in, that could be pretty darn special. You mentioned Ashton Genty. Funny aside, Brittany, who does all of the thumbnails for our YouTube, for the Dynasty WarZone on the Player Profiler YouTube, I was like, I need you to do me a thumbnail. You can do anybody you want, no Ashton Genty. Because if you go to not just Player Profiler, you go to like DLF or whatever other web Fantasy Pros, every thumbnail's Ashton Genty. Rightfully so. I wanted to mix it up a little bit. Tell me about Dylan Sampson, because I was not expecting to hear him in your top 5. What about him has him as your RB2, again, over guys like Kaleb Johnson, guys over Omarion, Hampton? Tell us more about Dylan Sampson, because this could be a guy we get super, super cheap come rookie drafts.
Yeah, again, anyone who's been listening to the DWZ network for a while knows that I have a type of back that I fall in love with. If you're 200 plus pounds and you're going to run in the 4.3s and you're a one-cut runner, it's really enticing for me. I fall in love with the Jerome Fords. I fall in love with the Jalen Wrights, that type of running back. When it comes to explosive, take it to the house ability, I think it's Dylan Sampson and TreVeyon Henderson. Those are the 2 backs in this year's class that you really have to watch out for outside of Genty. When it comes to Sampson specifically, though, go and watch his tape, and I can probably count on maybe 2 hands over the last 2 years the number of times that he's gone down on first contact. He has a knack for breaking any type of tackle that is not spearing him directly in the chest. And it is something that translates extremely well at the next level. Breakaway speed, big bot, not the biggest guy, like I said. He's more of a good way to look at it would be like a Dalvin Cook type of player. Like that type of breakaway speed coming out of Florida State. The reservations that people had about Dalvin Cook coming out that year, the same type of reservations you'll have with a Dylan Sampson. Not the biggest guy, can be a bad decision maker at times, and his pass blocking isn't the best, but his pass catching's there. He's got the breakaway speed. He's got requisite size, and he's been very successful for a Tennessee team that loves to run the ball. So it's been fun. He doesn't have the highest counting stats of anyone, because anyone that watches Tennessee understands they're kind of like Coastal Carolina, where they're like, hey, let's just throw 3 backs at people and see what happens. But he is a very fun player to watch, and he's up there for me. I'm in love with Dylan Sampson. This year was a great year for him.
Well, I'm pretty versed in like the guys that I'm pretty versed in so far, but didn't know a ton about him. So I pulled up some stats real quick. I mean, impressive stuff. I'll be very curious next month to see him at the combine. But 258 carries in 13 games. So you're talking about a guy who ran the ball approximately 20 times a game. Just a shade under 1,500 yards and 22 rushing touchdowns. Dude knows how to get into the end zone. I'm not super versed in Tennessee's offense and their scheme. 20 catches, average 7 yards a catch. Solid. That's what you're looking for out of a back. I will say this. That's what I call a writer downer. I have written down the name Dylan Sampson to do more watching of his highlights and seeing what I can glean from this. But do you think he could go in the first 4 rounds? Do you think his NFL draft capital will be as that of a top 4 round back?
100%. I realistically, with how the running back position is aging out and people aren't really wanting to pay them outside of Saquon Barkley, there's probably 5 to 6 running backs, I think, that will end up in the first 3 rounds this year. I think there's going to be quite a few that are sniffed around. You have like a guy that is mentioned in the chat earlier, a guy like, why am I blanking? Out of Iowa, it's going to kill me.
Kaleb Johnson?
Kaleb Johnson, there you go. Kaleb Johnson out of Iowa.
So I was debating him as my number 2 back, but my man love for Omarion Hampton would not allow that.
Yeah, he's a 1-year wonder. Like, that's the thing, is like there's a bunch of backs that went off this year in college football, and they all have the requisite size. There's not a lot of smaller backs in this year's class. So I think this is a really good year to replenish some of that old, recycled talent that's been there. Like Kareem Hunt has been relevant the back half of the 2024 fantasy season because they had no other options in Kansas City. They had to bring the guy who wasn't on a roster for 6 months to fill in. So just thinking about that.
It's not just him. I mean, Joe, I always say this for repeat listeners and watchers of the show. You know what I'm getting ready to say. The class of 2017 is the greatest running back class in the history of the NFL, especially if you go fantasy points. Because you mentioned Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, James. It just goes on and on and on and on. But those are the guys that, to your point, are still playing a high level that 2024 could have been it for a lot of them. Now, I know James Conner got extended. So did Alvin Kamara. So love the take on Sampson. Let me ask you this. I'm going to read you off the teams that I think could use a running back. And you tell me when I get done, which spot you like the best. I think the Vikings need a running back. Nothing against Aaron Jones. Again, he's a class of 2017 guy. They need a running game, especially if they're going to move to McCarthy. The New York Giants, although I think Tyron Tracy's fine and they got bigger needs. So maybe I'm looking the Dallas Cowboys, great spot, an absolutely great spot. I think the Steelers are going to be in the free agent market. And then my absolute personal favorite, the Denver Broncos. Man, you mentioned Alvin Kamara. How much fun would it be to keep? And I got Jamie. Jamie, by the way, always with us in the YouTube chat. Jamie brought up the Raiders need a running back. But how fun would it be to have Ashton Genty in Sean Payton's offense with Bo Nix? And wouldn't that just be perfect?
Yeah, there's a lot of fun fits that could happen. It's specifically just looking like one you didn't mention, but it's a contract year. They got to re-sign him if they want him. The Jags with Travis Etienne, like that's a place where a running back could very easily come in on the cheap this year, especially if they were going to take one late, which there's a lot of space. But Ashton Genty could be fun. Wherever Ben Johnson goes, if Ashton Genty finds his way there to be his Gibbs, I think you better watch out. And so just something to keep your eye on. But you had asked this originally regarding Sampson. For me, when it comes to landing spot, it's the first one you mentioned because that's another player that I think he plays a lot like is Aaron Jones. He's around the same size. Aaron Jones is a great pass catcher. He's never asked to pass a block, but he's very electric when he's used correctly. If he were to find his way in that Minnesota offense to replace the aging Aaron Jones in the same type of role, I think you'd be very happy as a fantasy manager.
Yeah, this is going to be the resurgence of the running back position. And for me, I'm not getting locked into anybody outside of Ashton Genty. Now, I don't think there's a landing spot so good that you would be able to leapfrog Genty, but I will say, even the best of prospects aren't perfect, because Genty, when he played against Penn State in the bowl championship, playoff, whatever you want to call it, started to say bowl championship series. I think I've dated myself there, but the current playoff, he didn't crush it. He did not crush it. And I'm not saying that, one bad game, because he's a really good prospect. And I can't wait to see him in the pros. Is there anyone else in my top five? Like, do you have any takes on Egbuka or Hampton? You kind of already mentioned Hampton. What are your thoughts on, we'll go with Egbuka and then Kaleb Johnson, because he was on the fringe of being top five. I just couldn't turn my back on Omarion.
Yeah, Egbuka is one of those ones where, I'm an Ohio State guy. I'm from Ohio. The whole family is an Ohio State family. I feel like every podcaster I know is an Ohio State guy. There's someone or knows someone that's from Ohio. But he is the one wide receiver over the last 3 to 4 years where he's gotten the hype that I have not felt has been 100% valid. He is a good wide receiver, but I'm not positive he's going to test as well as people think or say he is. When it comes to burners, I've seen a lot faster wide receivers play that type of deep role for him. Most of the plays that he's seeing deep down the field, he's pretty wide open. It's usually a broken coverage down the sideline, or you'll see him be an underneath space eater. He is a good wide receiver, and he could play a very good role. Jesse, one of the hosts of the Dynasty Front Office, isn't that what it got rebranded as, correct? Remind me. Or is it still the War Games?
They changed it to the Dynasty Front Office.
Yeah, Front Office. So he had posed a question to me where I think the perfect landing spot for a guy like Egbuka would be. For me, it's the Rams to replace Cooper Kupp. I think that would be the ideal role for a guy like Egbuka, to go in there, be an absolute monster, a chain mover, and to be a move piece across the offense. I like him a lot. He is not that far out of my top five, but he's not really pushing the envelope for me to fight his way in for me.
Okay. That is absolutely doable. And then Kaleb Johnson, I'm looking at his stats, eerily similar to your guy, Dylan Sampson. 240 attempts, that's 20 a game, and 1,537 yards. So a little bit better yard per rush, but nothing crazy. 22 touchdowns. Also 22 receptions. Solid prospect, man. I think this is the big give back to Dynasty. This is, we're all going to be able to replenish our running back coffers. For a long, long time, it's been very thin. And, and the NCAA has blessed us with guys like Bucky Irving, and even Rashad White before him, James Cook. A lot of guys that didn't come into the league with a ton of fanfare and landed in a really good spot. And then they went on to become very produced, well-producing fantasy players. So I've got a bunch of other questions for Dallas on the other side of this.
Oh, I see all this mock draft information out there. Oh, this mock, that mock. Hey, what about a real actual fantasy game? The Flex 4 game on FastDraft, draftfaster.com, is open. You draft 6 running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. The top 4 enter your lineup every week. It's that easy. It's that simple. Drafts take 5 minutes. There's a $50,000 prize pool. It's $15,000 to first. It's just a $5 entry. And the best part, no rake. No rake whatsoever on FastDraft. The first 2025 Best Ball contest to open in the world is ready for you to draft up to 150 teams. Draftfaster.com, draftfaster.com. Start playing Best Ball for real.
Do you believe we're at a point in the calendar where you can start drafting best ball for next year, and you can do it at FastDraft? And if you sign up and you're a new user and you use the promo code WarZone at FastDraft, then you'll get a dollar for dollar match up to $25. So you sign up, you get the $25 match, you got $50. The drafts are fast. You'll burn through that in no time, but looking forward to getting more involved with FastDraft as it relates to best ball this year. All right, so gonna hit you with some of the questions of like, besides Dylan Sampson, who's your fastest riser? Who's the guy who's moved in this short amount of time from say into December through now, who is raising up your rankings the more that you watch him?
Yeah. So Sampson's actually not a riser. I've been pretty high on him coming into this year. Tennessee is a school that it's pretty easy to see the talent coming through the pipeline. You kind of knew that Sampson was going to get the workload this year, but a guy that I don't think is getting quite enough love right now is TreVeyon Williams, wide receiver out of TCU. He's fun. I'm not going to give him the Debo comp. I refuse to give him the Debo comp, but if you have not yet watched film on him, he is very interesting to watch. He runs with his hair on fire. If Isaiah Pacheco was a wide receiver, that's what TreVeyon Williams is. That's how I'll put it for you. So very fun watch. Had a very electric season for TCU. They actually have two wide receivers. Him and Zach Besh are the two guys of note. I have both of them inside of my top 10 at the wide receiver position right now, just because I think when it comes to game-breaking ability and consistent production, they're a lot higher than even some of the more well-known names in this year's draft class.
And you bought me just enough time to pull him up in the I guess I want to just by default call it Pro Football Reference. It's not what it is in this case. It's the College Football Reference. Looking at it, 5th year senior, so he's going to come into the league a little bit older. Tall guy, 6'5". What kind of fit do you see him? Is he like a natural 2? Is there an NFL comparison to him that makes sense to you?
Yeah, he could be a very good 2. The guy that I think he could play similarly to, but even more physically daunting, is that really stretch vertical player on the outside, but really digs underneath, kind of like a Marvin Jones, but he's even more physically gifted than what a Marvin Jones was. Consistently, he's going to be a touchdown producer. I just don't think he's going to be a big target guy. Another fun one, just because he's athletic and we saw kind of what the upside production potentially could be, is almost like an Alec Pierce. When he has a guy that's willing to just sling the ball to him, it's really fun. Plus, he's got crazy yak ability. So he's just a fun little tool, but that's kind of what I envision him, a number 2 type of guy, kind of like a Marvin Jones, Alec Pierce in an offense to really give you that high-end touchdown production on any given season.
All right. And if one guy's rising, Drew in the chat, and this is the name that came to mind too, so I'm going to put Drew's comment up here. As it relates to your boy, TreVeyon Williams, he says the ceiling is T. Higgins and the floor is Gabe Davis. What do you think about Drew's comments?
I can't do it to my boy Higgins. Higgins gets comped to so many people as just like the only outside big guy. People forget that was the first conversation me and you ever had, actually, was about T. Higgins and how smooth of a route runner he is. TreVeyon's not that smooth of a route runner, so I can't even give him that ceiling. There is a guy in this draft class that I do have as a potential comp to Higgins, though, that we can chat about in a different section. I will allude to that based off of the questions that I know they're coming.
All right. Well, then I'll move on. So if TreVeyon Williams is your riser, who's your faller? Who's fallen a little bit in your eyes in the short period of time? And my big question is why? Why is this person fallen?
So I have a little list. I made a list of risers and fallers. They're all big name guys that I wasn't in love with last year, and I kind of gave them the benefit of the doubt just because the hype train was there. There was a lot of hype when they were coming into school. These are the big names. But for me, I would say based off of what we saw in 2022 going into 2023, there has not been a bigger faller than Donovan Edwards out of Michigan for me at the running back position. You saw a lot of talent pop up in this running back class. There was a lot of hype going on. He was on the NCAA 2024 cover, for God's sake, and he had an abysmal season with Michigan. And you can say what you will about that offense regressing, the team regressing after Harbaugh, but all they knew how to do and still know how to do is run. He still did not look very good for a guy that is supposed to take the top off of defenses at the next level.
You know, I pulled him up, and his yards per rush actually went up, but he only rushed for 589 yards. And with Blake Corum gone in a run-based offense, you would think that he would have he would have, I guess, been more of the focal point. I mean, we talked about Kaleb Johnson and Dylan Sampson, those guys getting 20 rush attempts a game. Now, when you're behind, it's hard to have 20 rush attempts a game, but he only averaged like a 10 and a half rush attempts a game. Not super great. But let me ask you this. Would your tune change if he wound up in LA with his former head coach, Mr. Jim Harbaugh? Because that's another really good landing spot that we didn't mention. I think they got everything out of J.K. Dobbins, a Gus Bus, God bless him. He's an aged veteran, but that's another really good landing spot.
Yeah, for me, the thing with Harbaugh is that I think what they need is a guy that can consistently churn out the 5 to 7 yard runs. And that's definitely not what I've been able to see from Donovan Edwards across his entire career. He's not the guy that's going to get you those intermediate runs. He's either getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage, arm tackled 2 yards down the field, or he's busted off a 60-yard touchdown. There's not really an in-between. He's more in the A-chain type of play style than he is another running back. And he's just not at that level athletically or really talent-wise for me to say that I would feel super good even with his old head coach in the Chargers offense.
All right. I want to ask you 2 questions for the chat. And this, for you podcast listeners, this is why you tune in on YouTube on Player Profiler, because if you have rookie questions as we're covering this stuff, would love to be able to ask questions, especially as now that we're in what I like to call guest season. We'll have more guests, not just Dallas. We'll have other rookie content creators out there. I've actually got a guest booked for next week when Jerry's back. But I want to ask you a couple questions out of the chat, and then we'll get into some more questions.
Yeah.
What Drew wants to know: what do you think about Ellick? Ayo Manor?
Ayo Manor. Yep.
Okay.
Wide receiver out of Stanford.
Okay.
He's a big boy. He's fun. He's really consistent underneath and on the outside. He's going to come in and be your X. Him specifically, I have questions about his athletic profile. He has kind of a similar frame to a lot of the wide receivers in this class. It's in that 6'2 to 6'3 range, right around 210 pounds. So he's well built. I just don't think he's athletically gifted like some of the other guys in that range are in this class. I think he can be a good possession wide receiver, hopefully with a ceiling like an Allen Robinson type of player, but not 100% positive that he's going to be in there. Just to shed light on it in general, he is decently high in my ranks, but he's not super high. I currently have him as wide receiver 8 in this year's class.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna write him down as a name to know, and then I'm gonna hit you with one more from the chat. Can Henderson? I'm assuming Jamie meant TreVeyon Henderson. Can TreVeyon Henderson be like a CJ2K? For you younger listeners, that's Chris Johnson, who played for the Tennessee Titans and ran for 2,000 yards, where the nickname comes from. But what are your thoughts on Henderson in that vein of player?
He's got fun breakaway speed. I think that Chris Johnson was a unicorn. I don't think we're ever going to see a Chris Johnson, a Jamal Charles type of player where he can just consistently rip off 7 yards every time he touches the ball. The closest thing we've got to that is A-Chain, but the only reason he's doing it is because he weighs about 180 pounds. So it's just not really what we're looking at. If I were to comp him closer to what you're hoping him to be, it would be like a Maurice Jones-Drew. If you can get that type of production from him towards the middle end of his career, it would be fun. But I really think he's got to be a lightning to someone's thunder, which is why we saw the resurgence of what he was his rookie season when he had another back in his backfield happen this year when they brought in Judkins from Ole Miss. So.
All right. Well, just wanted to reward the chat. You know, when you like and comment on the video, it obviously helps with the YouTube, and so just want to thank those guys for jumping in there with some good questions. All right. Give me your underrated guy. Now, a guy that, and we're not going to let you do, Dylan Sampson. That's the name to know. If we're going to write any name down that maybe you didn't know yet, Dylan Sampson, but someone else that you think's underrated that, is going to have a good past career set of data. He's going to put up some good athletic numbers and someone who can make some noise at the NFL.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a bonus on this one. Like I said, I made a list for every position relevant to fantasy for this, just in case we were chatting about some other players that I wanted to get on there. Quarterback for me is Jackson Dart. Don't want to dive super deep into it because I'll do a deep dive analysis on that for an episode coming in a couple of weeks. But really fun prospect. For some reason, isn't getting love in this quarterback position, which is fun. The running back of note for me that I think is the most underrated in this class is DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. He is my perfect fit for the Dallas Cowboys. If you want someone who can do absolutely everything, who doesn't need a good offensive line, because K-State did not have a super good offensive line, and is big enough to play both a thumper role, but fast enough to take any basically play to the house, go and watch DJ Giddens. He's a fun one. When it comes to the wide receiver position, I have Ja'Cory Brooks, former Alabama 5-star recruit stud, did absolutely nothing for Alabama, transfers to Louisville, and looks exactly how he looked his freshman year before the injury. He's a fun one that's been slowly rising up because it's hard to ignore the talent. And then for me, really under the radar talent at tight end right now, Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt. He was a former quarterback for Texas A&M, was a transfer. So when you think about him, you're thinking more of like a Taysom Hill type player, which again, you're looking for a replacement. He's probably not long for the league based off of the last couple of injuries, especially this last one this year, but he is a physical freak. If you have not watched his play, he is a little bit on the skinnier side. So he's more of the Evan Ingram type of body type, but he can move at the tight end position. And he had a very, very productive progression of his career with Vanderbilt over the last 2 years. So those are my underrated guys in this year's class.
Well, based off the success of a guy like Bucky Irving, I want you to tell me a little bit more about DJ Giddens. And the reason why is that I'm going to get back a little bit more this year in my rookie drafts to drafting running backs and trading for wide receivers. I'm looking at Fantasy Pros Player Profiler. We don't have our rankings up yet, at least not ones that I've been a part of. They have Giddens as their RB16. What is it that you're seeing with this guy that has him on your radar, that to have him that underrated?
He is a height, weight, speed guy that makes the correct decision almost every time at the running back position. He's always picking the right hole. The one thing with Giddens also, you'll find a common theme with the running backs that I really like: contact balance. He gets hit at the line of scrimmage a lot with this poor K-State offensive line, and he always falls forward. There's been a couple of times where they've needed him to really perform, and he did have some bad games. And some of the really bad unexpected losses that K-State had this year, he was kind of at fault to that, to where his normal play that he was consistently doing both last year and this year really didn't stand out. But the rest of the games, 6 yards a carry, like every single time he's touching the ball, and he's getting those on those consistent clips. He's not, the fake yards of getting a Saquon Barkley like 80 yards. I don't want to call them fake yards, but you know what I mean, where it's really skewing the stats. He's a consistent yard chewer, and he is a 20-20 guy. He had a really good season with the Cats this year, even though they were really disappointing on offense. All
right, I got two more questions for you, but I'm going to squeeze in a third one. Because if he's underrated, I don't want to say this next guy that I'm going to ask you about is overrated, but what are your personal thoughts on Cam Scatabo? Because, I mean, so much hype. I don't want to say he carried Arizona State, but, I mean, he did more than his share as a player in that game. Because, it's like, oh, he's catching a touchdown. He's running for a touchdown. He's doing all of the things. And where do you see him? What do you see him doing in the NFL?
Yeah, so this is actually a fun one. This is a guy that 5 years ago I probably would have fallen in love with because of his pass catching upside, but I have tried to really separate what is happening based off of how he schemed up at the running back position on those offensive weapon outlet passes, that type of thing, the deep wheel route that he caught in that game of note, versus the actual production, down in, down out. This is a really deep cut. If anyone and listen to this knows who this guy is, I'll be impressed. But there was a running back coming out of Cincinnati about 6 years ago by the name of Michael Warren that I was in love with. Was very similar to what Cam Sheduer was. And he went undrafted free agent, really ugly, not that great. I don't think he's overrated. Where is he ranked in the source that you were mentioning? Do you know?
They had him as 9, RB9.
Yeah. So for me, I have him at 12. So I'm not that far off ultimately. That's right around where he is. It's fun. You don't want to discount what your eyeballs are telling you, but I have a gut feeling that that type of play is not going to translate super well to the next level.
Well, you're not breaking my heart, but that's fun. That's fun. I hate to bring this comparison up because I don't want to compare a white running back to a white running back, but the name that I heard was Toby Gerhart. Remember Toby Gerhart? For you younger guys, you guys can go back. He was at Stanford before Christian McCaffrey. Wound up in Minnesota behind a guy, maybe you've heard of him. His name was Adrian Peterson. So a really good running back, but he crushed it in college and didn't do a lot in the NFL. I'm not going to hold Toby Gerhart against Cam Sheduer, but give me your small school guy. Who is a small school guy? I always will, look for those D2, D3, James Robinson type. I think that wasn't my hit, although I had a lot of James Robinson. That was Shane Hallam who put us on James Robinson the year before he came out into the draft. But give us a small school type guy that you really like.
All right. I love to give, so I'll give you one at all the positions outside of quarterback. Running back, I really like out of Liberty. Quinton Cooley, really productive runner. If you want to try to find potentially the next Sincere McCormick that could get a late end of season push and potentially steal some carries going into the next season, I think Cooley's probably your guy at the running back. Similar build, a little bit smaller, but really good tape when you look at him. For wide receiver, this one's a little bit, it's your flavor that you want is what I would say. For me, he's not really underrated, but it is a smaller school. Jalen Royals is solidly inside of my top 10 wide receiver from Utah State. He does everything you want from a true X wide receiver. The hype that people were putting on Javon Baker last year for New England is what they should be putting on a guy like Jalen Royals this year. And then at the tight end position, what do we want to go with? I think the small school guy, I kind of already brought up, it's probably Eli Stowers. I don't have a ton of smaller school guys. A lot of them are big names that just aren't really being talked about. So that's probably my smaller school guy to really take a look at is Eli Stowers. So.
All right, I want you to go back to the running back, the guy out of Liberty. What was his name again? Because, guys, this is why, unless you're driving, we call these writer downers. I'm writing this name down. See, if you're watching, that is an ink pen, old-fashioned. I'm not using the notes app on my phone. I'm going to write this guy's name down. What was his name again?
Yeah, it's Quinton Cooley. He is a thick boy. So the way I would describe him, Devonta Freeman, really thick, small body. He's in the 5'7", 215, 220 range. He is a little bowling ball.
That's another Maurice Jones-Drew-esque body type, but maybe the game is not the same, but that was Maurice Jones-Drew. Super short, but very
I
stout.
find him more in the Devonta Freeman or another Atlanta running back like Michael Turner, right around that same type of body type, really low to the ground, bounces off of people, really fun. But when you talk about production for a small school guy in Liberty where they don't pass the ball very much, they know exactly what they're going to do. Last 2 seasons went for 1,400 yards, went for a little under 1,300 yards on the ground, both years at over a 6-point yard per carry clip. He has a total of 29 touchdowns on the ground over the last 2 years. He's not going to be a pass catching phenom, but if you need a guy that can really grind it out, that's why I was saying Sincere McCormick comes to mind when I think of a small running back guy from the last couple of years to come out that I think fits that profile perfectly. Very good runner. So I don't know if he's going to test super well. He's obviously not going to have the drop of a Kyron Williams, but that's another guy who We hated the athleticism, but once he got the clip and got the carries, really started pulling apart from that running back group. I could see the same thing with a guy like Cooley.
Yeah, and Kyron Williams is just proof that where you go matters probably more than how good of an athlete you are. First of all, you need to be good at the game of football. I think people often forget about that. That's my favorite note of the show. I'm really intrigued by the Dylan Sampson because that's the guy. That's the guy right there that I do this show for. Right there. Quinshon Cooley is a name that I'll be drafting a lot of in the 5th round of rookie drafts. You know, now, could he come out and crush the combine and then get drafted in like the 5th round of the NFL draft, and then we're forced to rank him a little bit higher in our rookie rankings? Sure. But that's why I love doing rookie content. Those little nuggets right there. No guarantee that Dallas is going to unearth the next James Robinson who can give you like a top 5 RB, but a name to know, put on your draft board. Quinshon Cooley. All right. I want to ask you one more quick question, and then I want to get your prediction on the national championship game. I think I know, being a longtime Ohio resident and birthed there. But who is Dallas's guy? So this is my guy. One of my favorites ever was Cooper Kupp in 2017. Another favorite was Terry McLaurin. Those were like some of the quote unquote my guys. But who is Dallas's guy? Who is Dallas's my guy? And when we bring you back on, I'll give you some room to change. But who's your guy?
Yeah, for me, I want to give you a couple. I always make a list. I post it on Twitter every year. If you guys don't follow me, it's always pinned to the top of my thing. You can check my receipts over the last couple of years on some of my guys. Finally got that hit on Khalil Shakir this year. Felt really good with that affirmation on PFF. For those of you that weren't around 2 years ago, I had him as wide receiver 5 in that year's class. Everyone told me I was crazy. And lo and behold, he was the highest rated underneath slot wide receiver in the NFL by PFF this year. So kiss the air. Love it.
And having a good game tonight in a playoff game. He, just because you brought it up and it's fun, he is currently 6 catches for 67 yards.
Yeah, he broke NFL history with the longest successive amount of receptions without a incompletion. Like I think he went 48 for 49 on his 49th reception this season is when he finally had an incompletion when targeted from Josh Allen. It was insane. Like, he did not drop anything, but I'll give you a couple and then you pick between them and let me know what you want to know. Quarterback, ironically, you asked about the title game. It is Will Howard in this year's class. If there's 2 quarterbacks that aren't getting talked about enough as potential starters and or high-end backups at the next level from this class, it would be Jackson Dart and Will Howard. He's a former K-State guy. I'm a K-State grad, so a little bit of bias, but I watched the buds kind of bloom a little bit at K-State and then actually got to see what he could do when he had NFL grade talent around him at Ohio State, outside of one just wildly inappropriate decision to try to check down and run against Oregon. He's been pretty elite this year at the quarterback position. Running back, I love Devin Neal. I wish he had came out last year with the running back group last year because he's a little bit buried in this year's class. But again, if you want a straight line guy who has a lot of pass catching upside, Devin Neal out of the University of Kansas is your guy. The guy that I would probably lean the hardest into my guy this year is Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. He is the closest guy that I've seen to a T. Higgins since T. Higgins came out. Big wide receiver outside, every bit of 6'5", 220, smooth operator, catches everything, and basically was the Iowa State offense for the large majority of the last 2 years. He's seen that productive growth over the last 3 years since he started getting those reps of production increasing, which is what I typically look for wide receivers. If you're not going to break out as a true freshman, I need to see growth every single year for me to stay around. And then a guy that I think could have easily been in the underrated category and is my tight end 3 in this year's class is Oronde Gadsden the second out of Syracuse tight end. He was all of Syracuse's offense this year. He is the son of former Oronde Gadsden from the Miami Dolphins in the early 2000s. Very productive wide receiver. He's about 6'3", 240, so he's more in that Jonnu Smith size, but you see it athletically, and he is a move tight end that will be very fascinating to watch where he goes, because again, everyone knew that Gadsden was getting the ball on basically half of the targets every game with McCord with Syracuse, and they still couldn't stop him.
Well, I wrote all of those names down because I'm going to do that for two reasons. We're going to encourage people to go check out the Rookie Rundown. That'll be on the Dynasty WarZone YouTube channel, and it'll be on the Dynasty WarZone podcast channel. So however you consume your Dynasty content, that's where to get it. He'll start dropping episodes. Last year we did Mondays, sometimes Wednesdays. Maybe that'll be the same cadence this year. I don't know. We'll get them out quick because the information's so fluid this time of the year. But here it is. We've timed this out perfectly. It's the start of the fourth quarter of the Buffalo-Baltimore game. But there's another game tomorrow night, and it's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the 7 seed, taking on the Ohio State Buckeyes, the 8 seed. According to the guys in Vegas, Ohio State 8.5-point favorite. Dallas, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, on paper it should be the Buckeyes. I think the shiniest of two turds won that Notre Dame versus Penn State game because that was very ugly last week. And I think a lot of people would have liked the final if it was a different team that kind of gave you a little bit more oomph on offense. With Notre Dame coming in, I have a lot of question marks about the running game. Jaden Love is their running back. He's a very fun, explosive running back in this year's class as well. Another name to write down if you're not familiar with it. But he's been injured the entirety of the playoffs. He had a crazy physical run last week, but he didn't look like the same guy. And you really saw that offense just kind of have to jump on the back of Riley Leonard to hopefully run to a win. They were able to, but when it comes to mobile quarterbacks against Ohio State, that's the one thing they've been really good at this year defensively. So I don't think that game plan is going to work very well for Notre Dame.
All right. Well, I'm going to lean Notre Dame so you were the Ohio-born resident. I went to Ball State, so we're never good in football. I mean, maybe maybe a bowl game or something, but I'm going to stay in state. I'm going to root for Notre Dame. I don't think they're going to win. It would be huge. They haven't won one since 1988, so we're talking almost 40 years. I do say this, due to the proximity of Notre Dame to Chicago and the amount of good Catholic folk walking the streets of Chicago, if the Irish were able to pull this off, it would be shocking. It would be shocking, but that city would be drunk for maybe it would be second only to when the Cubs won the World Series a few years ago. That's what I got. You're the Bears fan. The Bears have not been giving them a lot of football things to root for. So maybe the Irish. Yeah, there you go. That's a championship. Dallas, I think it sounds like the best place for these people to start following you the most is on X, Twitter, Twix. Follow him there at Salad Galore. That's salad with 2 L's because that's Dallas backwards. Salad Galore. You can look at his pinned tweet. He'll be posting rookie snippets, and then he'll be doing the podcast. But is there anything else that you would like us to know before we get you out of here?
Not really. I guess I'll just double down. Like anyone who's listening, anyone that has questions about the rookie class, my DMs are always open. Obviously, anyone in the Patreon, you already know I'm pretty active in that. I will try to chime in, and if you tag me in anything, I will always give you an answer. It may just be a little bit slower because work is pretty crazy, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show for me. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions. I would say if you're not comfortable with your process on rookies, finding people that are very comfortable, even if you don't agree with all of their takes, they can give you their reasoning if they're good at what they do. It's the best way for you to get better so that you can then start forming your own opinions on the rookies. So again, just don't be afraid to ask me questions. And Memphis, I'm sure, would be more than willing to answer anything for all of you once he learns a little bit more on the rookies too. But it's the best way that you guys can improve in rookie drafts. So
I'm feeling pretty good. Like I'm charging the Death Star, you know, like we're almost operational. Like I feel like if I had to do a mock draft today, and I don't want to do a mock draft next week, we're going to do one probably the first week of February. But I could easily go 2 to 3 rounds right now. I'd feel very comfortable going. And obviously when we do a mock draft here on the show, you know, Jerry goes 1, I go 2, Jerry goes 3. So I would feel comfortable going through the first 2 to 3 rounds. I'm not Quinshon Cooley ready, but that's what you're for. That's what you do for us with the rookie rundown. I thank you for having us on. You mentioned the Patreon, patreon.com/Dynasty WarZone. If you sign up, we've got a few orphans in our leagues. We may do our first dispersal in one of them this year. We don't have a lot, but if you're one of the newer $5 a month patrons, you will get one of these teams for the 2025 season for free. So that's your incentive. It's Dynasty WarZone. It's patreon.com/Dynasty WarZone. We mentioned anything that we're affiliated with Player Profiler. If there's a discount to be had, try WarZone. Save you a couple of bucks. And we'll be back next week. We'll be back with Jerry. We have another special guest next week. Dallas, man, it was good to see you. And talking rookies was just a good way to catch up with a good guy. But I'm going to get you out of here, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, Dallas.
Yeah, anytime, man.
See you guys. Have a great week.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.
Perfecto.